Is joining us right now. Hi, April.
Hi,
Can you hear me okay? Or should I
I
put my
can.
AirPods on to make sure
Well,
we
I
are
mean, we
fully
can go old fashioned if you want
listening to
to.
each other?
We can be old fashioned. Can you hear
Is
me
that
okay?
working?
Yeah, I can hear you.
You can hear me? Figure this out why
Absolutely.
this is not working. Okay, there you are.
Hello.
Hi, you look absolutely beautiful.
Oh, well, thank you. This is
I'm so,
COVID attire these days.
I know, I'm so glad that you and I could connect today. And it all happened really in just, I don't know, the last hour, having a discussion because we're so, I think we're tired.
Yeah.
I think we're tired, we're frustrated, and we're overwhelmed. And I think it's not just the people in the US, Canada is overwhelming. We're trying to figure out how we can help. It's happening here. So recently there was a case as well yesterday. And I think the idea was today to kind of discuss how it's okay to feel the way you're feeling and the things we can do to actually work together and go forward. How do we do that? It's enough that we talk about it, but what can we do? So first question to you, and this is a loaded question. How are
I
you?
love those. Let's go.
So how are you?
Oh, yeah, that is loaded. I am doing as well as can be expected. I very much recognize my privilege in all of this. I am a consultant. I travel around the world, and so a lot of my business has been cut completely off. And yet, as of today, May, whatever it is, I'm not feeling, the financial pressure that so many of our friends and colleagues and relatives are. I still have a roof over my head. My children are fine. I have food
Mm,
in the fridge. And so I try to start at that base level because there are some people who are experiencing housing insecurity, food insecurity, internet insecurity. We know that internet is just as basic, as
yeah.
food and water for so many people with respect to communication. So from that standpoint, I'm doing okay. I'm not a huge fan of people. So I am definitely an ambivert at best, meaning that I can turn it on as I am now, to speak to people and to do large groups of people and audiences. But I would much rather be on my couch. So the quarantine, I'm sure, has not affected me as much as it has so many people. That said, about me personally, everything that's going on in the world today, not just in the United States, which is enough, but all around the world with people suffering from COVID-19, with the unrest that we have here in the States, with yet more examples of police brutality and state-sanctioned violence, and it's not just George Floyd, it's also Breonna Taylor. There are just so many names, and one would have thought that because people are on the streets less, because we are, not as susceptible to being pulled over by cops because we're not on the road as much, that things would have slowed down.
Mm.
And so now we've got this sort of double issue with attempting to protest on behalf of Black lives while still attempting to keep ourselves safe and healthy from the coronavirus. How do you socially distance when you're running from tear gas from the cops? Right?
Hmm.
It's impossible. And so all of those things are going through my mind all the time. I also have a 20-year-old son and a 16-year-old daughter. And, thankfully right now, they are not doing the things that college students and high school students do because they're safely at home. But I think about them all the time with respect to, Jamie Foxx did an interview, or, it was live not too long ago, and he said, you know, everything that we've taught our children is not enough.
Mm.
And that's the thing. You can teach your kids right from wrong. You can, tell them what to do when they have to have interactions with anybody, with law enforcement or with their teachers, or any semblance of authority. You can watch them, they grow up to be big and strong and successful, whatever that means, and it's still not enough. They still can be taken from you at any time, and that is harrowing for for Black mothers, for brown mothers, for Native mothers, who are trying to do the best that they can, and knowing that, you can raise the perfect kid, whatever that means, and they still make it pulled over at any point by the police.
You live in Washington.
Mhm.
Is that fear as big as it was in Minneapolis as it is in Washington?
Yes, I don't think, state sanctioned violence is not geographically specific. So it can happen in big cities, it can happen in small towns. We can talk about Dylan Roof, in Charlotte, North Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
We can talk about Tamir Rice. We can talk about Trayvon Martin, in Sanford, Florida. There is no distinction here. The only difference may be that there may be more Black and Latinx cops on the force in Washington, D.C. But, as the saying goes, all your skin folk ain't kinfolk. The
Mm-hmm.
fact,
Yeah.
because sometimes, that blue badge means more than Black skin.
Mm-hmm.
And so the pressures, the concerns are the same throughout the country.
You talked about isolation earlier, and one of the things I was noting yesterday was Andrea Jenkins talking about how racism in this pandemic is actually a health issue. Over 100,000 people have died in the US. Majority are Blacks, Hispanic, and Brown, as she said. How do you feel that breaking down to for me in terms of what that means when she says that?
Yeah, it means that there is now additional data, because this isn't new, but additional data and research that shows that economic wealth, insecurities, and disparities disproportionately affect Black and Brown people in this country.
Mm-hmm.
The part of the reason why Black and Brown people are being disproportionately affected by COVID-19 is because we are the essential workers. We are the bus
Mm-hmm.
drivers. We are the people who are still working at that restaurant, even though it's only carry out now. We are the custodians who still have to clean those office buildings, or whatever those cases may be. So we are still on the front lines. We're still the medical technicians and the nurses, and so on and so forth. And so that's why I think we're seeing disproportionate numbers in the Black and Brown communities. In addition to the fact that we are not believed when we go to the doctor and tell them that we're sick.
Mm.
And we know about the issues of Black maternal health, and the numbers are staggering with respect to the number of Black pregnant women who die either during or right after childbirth because they were not believed by their doctors, or they did not have the right advocacy from their
Mm-hmm.
medical professionals. So we show up to the hospital and say, well, we don't feel well, or my temperature is sort of, elevated. Oh, well, maybe that's just this, or, take a Tylenol, go home, or what have you. And very often we don't have an opportunity to go back multiple times because we've got a job
Mm.
to work, so you can't sit there in an emergency room for 6 hours or what have you. And then you get to the point where it's too late. Right. And then what do you do? Because you can't take off work because you've got children to feed at home, and you can't go to the doctor or go to the doctor multiple times, and you can't get a test because people don't believe that you're really sick, whatever that means.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think all of that contributes to the disproportionate numbers we're seeing in Black and Brown communities.
How angry are you that the fact that we are in isolation and this is happening? And when we look at what happened to George Floyd, it's hard to watch. It's difficult for a lot of people to watch. And there's been so many cases. You're right. We caught this on camera. But this one's really hit people really hard. I think they're just fed up right now. But how hard is it for you to understand this is actually happening at a time where we're supposed to be in this together, separated by 2 meters? We're supposed to be in isolation. Why? Why?
I am um, disappointed, but I don't think I have the energy to be angry, because there's nothing new about George Floyd that wasn't also true for Philando Castile and Tamir Rice and Rakia Boyd and Sandra Bland, and so on and so on and so on. And so you get frustrated after a while that we're still having these conversations. But part of the issue is the right people aren't
Mm-hmm.
having the conversations. So you and I can sit here and talk about the need for change and how this is horrible, but we don't have the power, right? The political capital to make the change. So it's not until our legislators, our judicial folks on the bench, people in the executive branch, whether that be local, state, or federal government, it's not until they get off their behinds and make some changes that we're ever going to see change. It has, the change has to come from the top down, and it has to be structural. And so, there can be no surprise with 45 in office because he is fomenting hate. He's calling people who are protesting. And why are they protesting? They're protesting because an unarmed man died at the hands of state
Yeah.
sanctioned violence. Had George Floyd not been killed, been murdered, and there's a legal difference between killed and murdered. In my mind,
Mm-hmm.
had he not been murdered by Officer Chauvin, there would not be people in the streets. And if there were not people in the streets, then there would not be looting, and and so on and so forth. And so it's all related. It goes back to there. So if you are, at one point, 45, I don't like to use his name, but the person currently in the White House, at one point he said, rough them up a little bit when you put them in the police cars. Well, if you are fomenting violence, then this is what you get.
Yeah.
It can't be, so you can't get angry at what almost feels like a foregone conclusion.
Now, a lot of people are saying the looting, the fire, just going out and destroying property is not the way to do it. You should do it more peacefully.
Yeah, I've
What do
heard
you
that.
think? Yeah.
I don't think that the oppressor gets to tell the oppressed how they should be protested. I don't think you get to make that call.
Mm-hmm.
If you were doing your job, then there would be no need for people to be out in the streets. Martin Luther King, very famously said, a riot is the language of the unheard.
Mm.
And we also need to talk about the difference between protesting, because the protests that I have seen, the people out in the streets during the day, have been lawful, have been peaceful, have been people uplifting the name of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, and it's been happening in Denver and Kentucky and Minneapolis and all over the country. It's not until the police sort of come in the evenings under cover of darkness, that things get violent and things escalate. And I think that's the issue. If you give people an opportunity, as I think the Minnesota governor said today, if you give people an opportunity to express what they're feeling, then things may not escalate. At some point, I just don't think that you get to dictate what things look like when you are part of the cause of why we are here in the first place.
Amen to that. Omar this morning, a CNN reporter at 5:30 a.m. listened and he was live and he got arrested. Some are saying that he wasn't following the rules, but we can see he was following the rules in the
Mm-hmm.
video. And some are saying it was a racial reaction because he wasn't a white reporter, he got arrested. Do you feel that way?
Yes.
You
It's
do.
clear. And again, there's video, and I wrote a piece for the Washington Post after the death of Alton Sterling, talking about why I will no longer share graphic videos of Black bodies succumbing to violence, because I think that leads to PTSD for us. I absolutely agree that the videos are necessary, because without the video, it's the word of the cops or law enforcement officials against the individual who very often is dead and can't speak for himself or herself anymore. But I'm not sure that we should be sharing them repeatedly on social media, because
Mhm.
that's a type of trauma porn that I don't think that we need in our lives. But separate from that, I we all saw it for ourselves. And then there's this gaslighting about, oh, well, you didn't really see, there's always a question, well, what happened before the camera got? Well, we saw the entire exchange
Yeah.
on CNN Live, and so there can be no question. And in fact, Abby Phillips, who is a CNN colleague of Omar Jimenez, who was arrested this morning, said that she talked to a white CNN colleague who was actually on the ground in the same area that Omar was. He showed his credentials and he was let go. So what's the difference, right?
Hmm.
What's the distinction other than race?
Hmm.
And Thankfully for Omar and the rest of the CNN crew, they had CEO Zucker or President Zucker to be able to call the governor directly. But so many people don't have those resources. You know, they're
Mhm.
out there on their own. And then who do they call to get them out of jail and that kind of thing? And so, you know, and then I saw Omar, he was like right back at it, you know, which is amazing to me because, you know, that
Yes.
had to be a very stressful situation for him. So he's a total professional in doing his job.
When we talk about the law enforcement, um, we know it's corrupted, as we've seen. Do you believe in any aspect of it? Do you believe there is good when it comes to the law? I mean, you used to be a lawyer. Do you
Yeah.
believe there is an opportunity to build on the good that is out there?
Um, yeah. I
Ah,
don't think so. And
ah,
and I will say, you know, I have family members who were in law enforcement, who were cops. You know, I have had family members who work for the federal government. But I think at some point that the system becomes so broken and in disrepair that you just sort of have to scrap it and start from scratch. And I'm not sure what that looks like, to be honest. You know, so am I saying there shouldn't be any cops on the street? Maybe, you know, or maybe we need to do community policing. You know, back in the day when dinosaurs roamed the earth and I was a latchkey kid, you know,
hmm
the community looked out for each other. You know, and so the lady down the street would know when I did something wrong, and my mother would know before she walked in the house, right?
Yeah.
And so there isn't that anymore. You know, our lives have changed, you know, with a lot of things going on, but there is so much that can be done um, if things are fundamentally changed. You know, I believe that if there has to be law enforcement, they should live in the community that they serve, right?
Mm,
So you are much less likely to arrest John, you know, who you see walking down the street, you know, or Jamal, who you see walking down the street, who, because, you know, he doesn't look like he belongs in that place. But if you've known Jamal since he was 8 years old, then you're going to give him the benefit of the doubt. Now, that's not always true
mm.
because what we're hearing now is Officer Chauvin knew George Floyd and worked with him at the same restaurant for over 10 years. And so if you can ignore the pleas for mercy,
Mm.
if you can put your knee on the neck of someone that you know, if you can kill someone in cold blood and not give them the benefit of the doubt, someone that you know, then what
Yeah, no.
how can any of us possibly think that we have any shot whatsoever with officers that we don't know who we encounter on the street? So, you know, I think I just talked myself out of my own argument, right? Because sometimes
Yeah.
even when you know the person, it's not enough.
hmm
And so I don't know what it looks like, but I don't have any faith. I don't even call it the justice system anymore. I don't have any faith in the legal system. Um, in part because what we've seen 45 do since he's been in office is appoint life appointments for judges, very conservative judges throughout the system, right? And so even after he leaves office, whether that's 2021 or 2024 or whenever it is, there are going to be very conservative people in place who will not give the benefit of the doubt to marginalized folks. We just know that, right? And so even if you talk about trying to have your day in court, if the scales of justice are so imbalanced against you that you have no
hmm
shot, then what's the point? How can you believe in that system?
You know, you scare me when you say you have no faith in the justice system. It's a very scary statement to make. They're there to protect us. They're there to make sure we're okay. So what do we do? What can we do? You said it starts from the higher ups. It's you just said 45 is corrupted. How
Yeah,
do we as citizens make that change happen? What can we do to change that comment about not believing in your justice system?
right. We become the higher ups. We run for office, you know, and we start with PTA president. and then we move on to school board, and then we become a council person or a county executive, and then maybe we're running for mayor or whatever the case may be. We need the right people in positions of power. You run for Congress. I mean, I don't agree with everything that AOC says or does, but
Yeah.
she was a bartender 3 years ago, right?
Yeah.
And now she is a sitting congressperson. And if she can do it, anybody can do it. She's great and everything, but there's nothing unique or special about her. She was hit at the right moment at the right time. So, and I'm not trying to discount her at all, but I'm saying she's an everyday person. And so we all can do a little bit more within the system. I truly believe that the system has to be changed from within. We need outside pressure. We need boots on the ground, literally and figuratively, knocking on those doors. And then we need the people on the inside. And that's why it's so important. When people say, call your senator, call your congressman, that
Yeah.
actually matters, right? You call in and they take your information down. And so it's always important that you call your personal congressperson or your personal senator. So, I live here in DC. I'm not going to be calling, for, in California or New Jersey or something like that, because they write it down. Or is this person an actual constituent? And they sometimes need the external pressure to say, hey, my constituents want this, and so I'm going to vote for this because I know if I don't, I get voted out. So we need the internal pressure for more or less running for office, and then we need the external pressure of people with boots on the ground saying, this is what needs to change, or we're voting you out.
But we need change now. That looks like a process that's going to take a long time. Right now, we're seeing people out there and protesting, trying to get their voice heard. There's an emergency state in Minneapolis. People are going out and protesting. Does that help? Does that actually make any changes in terms of what's happening?
You know, I I, I think it does.
Okay.
I think it helps the people on the ground to be able to express their frustration and a need that is necessary for those people who live there every day, who may have known George, who live in that community, and so on. I think it also helps nationally. What we've seen this this time around, which I think is different, is that we've seen law enforcement agencies from around the country
Hmm.
speaking out about the violence that they saw and using words like murder and using words like unjustified that I had not seen before. And I've been on this earth 50 years now, right?
Hmm.
And we see other law enforcement officials, and I'm talking about mayors from around the country, from Denver and Chicago and elsewhere, speaking out about this. And so I think it does matter here. And it's a welcome change because again, it's got to start from the top down, and it can't just be Minneapolis solving Minneapolis's problems, because this is a nationwide issue. So I want to believe that it's helpful in that sense. It's obviously not going to solve racism. It's obviously, there were
Hmm.
issues in Minneapolis long before George Floyd died, and these issues are similar across the country. But it feels like some people are slowly, very slowly coming out of their slumber.
Hmm. I almost feel too, listening to you, is the fact that people are taking out their cameras and taking a video and getting close to it. They may be in trouble if they're close to the law enforcement, but they're taking that step. We hear people saying he's not breathing. They're using their voices, and I think that's the change I've seen in the last year or so, that people are putting themselves forward to actually take law into their hands to protect the person that's being hurt. Do you feel that way?
Absolutely. I think that since Trayvon Martin, to be honest,
Yes.
and we all learned, I didn't know what the stand your ground law was before Trayvon Martin died. I think
Yeah.
we're all becoming more intelligent and more aware and more knowledgeable about laws that, I saw a video the other day where, someone was, there was a stop and frisk happening in the street, and some cop was going through the trunk, and a woman, again, with the camera, walked over and said, hey, bro, he's got to have a warrant to search your car. And then
Yeah.
she walked off. But that was empowering both for her and for the person who was getting searched, right? And so I think we are becoming much more knowledgeable. And I always talk about the difference between allies and advocates. The ally is passive. Oh my God, look what's going on in the country. It's horrible. Maybe I can donate some money or what have you and make myself feel better. The advocate is the person who uses their privilege, and we all have it. Even as a Black, a straight, able-bodied woman, I have privilege over the disabled community. I have privilege over the LGBT plus community, right? And so the advocate is the person who uses their privilege and stands in the gap on behalf of marginalized folks for communities to which they not belong. So the ally is passive, the advocate is active. Right. And so we saw, for example, in Minneapolis, there was a lineup of white people, I think men and women, standing shoulder to shoulder, standing in between the Black protesters and the cops. That's advocacy. That's literally putting your body on the line so that people will stay safe. I'm not suggesting that, people always need to literally put their body on the line, but there's always something more that we can do. How else can I make this change happen? What little more who can I amplify? Who should I be listening to? Is there a bail fund that I can donate even $10 to? There's always something more that we can do.
So freedom is a very it's difficult to define right now. As a Black person walking out that door, and you were saying you don't believe in the justice system, how do you make sure you are protected and you will be safe when you walk out that door?
I can't. I can't. As I mentioned, I have a 20-year-old son. Obviously he drives. And so we've had the driving while Black conversation many, many, many times until he rolls his eyes, but it's like, no, I am going to drill this into you. What do you do? Not if, but when you get stopped. Where are you keeping the registration and insurance in your car? Let's take a walk around the vehicle and make sure that your lights are working and that your tags are not expired. So there's no overt reason for them to pull you over. And then, the guilt that I feel as a mother of a Black man, sending him out to the store to get, a gallon of milk or whatever, obviously pre-corona, but, because I didn't feel like putting on a bra, or because I was, feeling lazy, or I was in the middle of something else. And so I said, hey, can you go pick up my dry cleaning for me? God forbid anything happened to my child on a run that I sent him for, that it's impossible. So even when I step out, because it doesn't matter what you look like, it doesn't matter what your socioeconomic status is, it doesn't matter what your education is. We saw that with Christian Cooper, right? Harvard, the birder in Central Park, Harvard trained and, avid bird watcher and just the biggest nerd that you ever want to meet, although he's kind of cute, but it doesn't matter. So there is no way that you can protect yourself. You attempt to protect your heart, right? You attempt to keep your soul full as much as you possibly can. But your physical body is always at risk. There are people that say, after Ahmaud Arbery, there are people that say, Sterling K. Brown from the show This Is Us, he's an avid runner. And he talked about, he was talking about wearing the mask, right? And literally and figuratively. So he has to wear the mask when he runs because, social distancing and all that. But that makes him look menacing because he's a dark-skinned Black. And I mean, Sterling wouldn't hurt a fly, right? Everybody knows that if you knew who Sterling was. But now here's a Black man running down the street and, he looks like he's running from something as opposed to running to his next distance goal, right? There are Black folks who say they only run with the paraphernalia on of their, Ivy League university because, if he went to Harvard, maybe he's not so much of a threat. There are others who will only run with their dog because white folks love dogs. So maybe I won't be seen as a threat because I've got Fido with me, right? Those are the things that we have to think about as we walk outside of the house every day.
Do you feel it's been worse with the present president? I don't even know how to ask this question because it's always been there. Racism has always been there. And, you know, Will Smith, it's just the fact that we're not filming it. But
Mhm.
have you felt a change with the recent president? And then people are able to be racist outwards now. They're able to speak their words, their disgusting words now. They feel they have the freedom to do that. Do you see that happening in the last two,
Yes.
3 years?
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what it is. It's the racism is more overt now. And that's not to say, I mean, let's remember Trayvon Martin died during President Obama's administration, right? And there's so many other examples. Hurricane Katrina happened, during President Bush's administration, and that was a
Yeah.
horrible, he had a horrible response to it. So yes, but part in my mind, and this is personal, it's not like, I work for me, so when I speak for my whole organization or whatever, but in my mind, black bodies since 2000, January 2017, since 45 came into office, are being used as a proxy for Barack Obama in this sense, in the sense that there were racist white people who could not stand the fact that a black man, a smart, intelligent, and articulate, handsome, family man, black man was in charge of the entire country for 8 years. And they were so angry that that anger and that fury had boiled over. And so any black man that they see now is a threat because he is a proxy for that beautiful black family that we had in the White House for 8 years. And so it's just bubbled over. Is there more racism now? Not necessarily, but people know to record it more. And so we see more of it. Nothing's really changed. I just think that things are more overt now than they were, 4 or 5 years ago. And it remains to be seen what happens next. There were
Mm-hmm.
people who said, oh, well, Obama was elected president, and so racism is over. No, we're in a post-racial society.
Was
No.
it better when Obama was president?
It was more insidious when
Okay.
Obama, I can't say it was because again, Trayvon Martin, we had Dr.
Right.
Skip Gates, who was manhandled by cops on his front doorstep, and then they
Yeah.
had to have that beard ceremony thing in the garden, which was really weird. So it was different, but definitely not better.
Yeah. Who do you want to be the next leader?
Um, Someone who is virulently anti-racist, and not just not racist, but anti-racist. So there's a book by Dr. Ibram Kendi called How to Be an Anti-Racist, because you have to take it to another level. It's not just enough to say, I don't have a racist bone in my body and I voted for Obama twice. And you have to go a step further and show how you are going to help dismantle white supremacy in this country. I want somebody who is thinking every single day about marginalized people in this country. So the way that I move through life is I ask myself, before I do something, before I go, do a talk or whatever, before I take a significant action, how is this decision going to impact a disabled Black trans woman?
Mm,
I always try to keep in mind the most marginalized person in the world, and say, if what I'm doing is benefiting her, then it'll
yeah.
benefit everybody else and hopefully me as well. And so that's what I want. I want not just the top leader, but all leaders to be thinking about disabled Black trans women and saying we need more policies that are going to help them, because a rising tide lifts all boats. But where are you starting? What you're doing, you're going to cut taxes, but who is that really going to affect, right? You give us the $1,200 stimulus, but who is that really going to? You're going to bail people out, but it's really just the corporations, but
Hmm.
are you thinking about the most marginalized, those who are most in need all the time? And I think if people keep those things in mind, regardless of who they are, whether they're regular folks like you and
Hmm.
me, or if they're the leaders of the free world, that things will be a better place. So I'll be voting for Biden. I'm not endorsing him, but obviously I'll be voting for Biden. But there's an interesting conversation for many Black folks, not all, but for many. The only time that we have been motivated and engaged about voting for someone has been for Barack Obama, and especially in 2008, and to a lesser extent
Yeah.
2012.
Yeah.
But other than that, it's always been. Well, it's not this guy. It's not the other guy.
Yeah.
It's not the
Yeah.
Republican. It's
Yeah.
not the overt racist. And so I watch, so-called allies and progressives and literal liberals and so on, talking about, well, I'm just not motivated to vote this time, or I may stay home, or, I'm not pro Biden, but he's better than Trump. It's like, well, welcome to our world. It's
Right.
like that. It's always been that way for us. But so I implore people to, think about the last 3 or 4 years, and ask yourself whether you want another four.
Mm.
I also say, as we talked about before, it's imperative that we hire, that we elect people who are going to have our interests at heart at all levels up and down the ticket. So if
Mhm.
what gets you to motivated to get into that poll booth, in November is, you really don't like your sheriff because he pulled over your child or whatever the case may be, or your councilman, really, redistricted. And so your kid is going to a different school. Well, you get in there and you vote for that person or vote against that person.
Mhm.
And while you're there, please pull, please pull
Yeah.
the lever up the ticket a little higher, and vote for the candidate of your choice.
With everything, with the emotions high right now, and it's always, every incident, everyone's emotion gets high, but there's something different about this moment. And I think we said it, it's just fed up.
Yep.
So, and it's one thing for blacks to help blacks, but it's everyone else needs to come together to make that change happen, even if it's higher ups or not, Caucasians, everybody. What can people do to come together and try to take the step forward and make that change happen?
Yeah, I think people need to realize that although the bodies may be Black, the communities belong to all of us,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And so, you know, George Floyd, or whatever name you want to use, whatever Black body you want to use, he was just one person who was part of a community. And so
Yeah.
all of this is going to affect you. And why would you wait until it's literally knocking on your door before you do something, right? Because then it's too late. And who is going to stand up for you if you haven't been standing up for other people?
Yeah.
And so, if non-Black folks are looking for things that they can do, again, I say, there are bail projects like the Minnesota Freedom Fund that you can donate to others, and any amount, $5, $10. We're all quarantined, so whatever you were going to spend on that daily latte that you can't get at Starbucks now, maybe donate that. Let's talk about voter registration, that make the connection between what 45 is doing to gut the United States Postal Service and progressive people on the other side attempting to get mail-in ballots working for many people. There is a connection there, right?
Hmm.
Because Trump
Hmm.
has said, the more people do mail-in voting or
Yeah.
absentee voting, the less Republicans win. So make
Right.
that connection. And once you make the connection, help with voter registration. Get on the phone and do GOTV. There's so many things you can do online because we're all at home now.
Hmm.
Let's talk about voter suppression, and have those conversations. Who within your family needs a come to Jesus or Muhammad or Allah moments about, the things that they support and the things that they are saying, right? So have those tough conversations with family and friends, and you can do it just as you and I are, face to face online now, but maybe it would be a little easier because we're not in the room, so you can't feel the energy as much, but I can
Hmm.
still look you directly in the eyes.
Hmm.
Read more. Amplify the voices of those who are on the ground more. Don't ask any Black folks for labor. Don't hit me or anybody else up saying, oh my God, racism is horrible. What can I do? Don't do that. Go, I'm going to tell you to go to Google, right? and read more, Black authors, read Audre Lorde, read Dr. Ibram Kendi, read Jason Reynolds, read James Baldwin, and then, engage with people politely on social media and see what they're doing, and then attempt to mirror that behavior and those activities.
April, how would you describe United States of America in 2020?
Fractured, on life support. United isn't a word that I would use. It's, it, this is the only country I've lived in, obviously, and every now and again I have conversations about, do I want to still live here? Because, I have options to go elsewhere, and I'm very privileged to be able to say that. I will be in the country where my kids are. So until I can convince everybody to go,
Come to Canada.
I have to stay. Right. But, you know, it's disappointing, right?
Yeah,
That we're
yeah,
still having these same conversations.
yeah.
There is very little that has changed since the 60s when my parents were active, to now, 50, 60 years later. And so how much more will we have to endure, before we can see systemic change?
Yeah.
And I don't have the answer to that. Are things better for my kids than they were for, my parents and grandparents? Well, sure, because we're not living in Jim Crow anymore.
Right.
But I still know, but I still fear for the lives of my kids every single day, as they have to deal with macro and microaggressions in their lives. So, this country, it has always been broken. This country was built on white supremacy. This country was built on the backs of enslaved people, and was stolen from the native people who were here first. And so if that's your start,
Yeah.
and you've never done anything to reconcile that, even Germany, had those, and South Africa too, had trials and conversations, very difficult ones, so that they could deal with the healing, and get to that place. And they seem to be in a better place now than they were then. We don't even acknowledge the problem. Malcolm X famously said, if you stick a knife in me 12 inches and you pull it out 9, is that progress, right? If you
Right.
pull it out, if you pull it all the way out, is that progress? He said progress doesn't happen until the healing starts to take place. But if you won't even acknowledge that the knife is there, if you're
Yeah.
going to gaslight me and tell me that I fell on the knife or what have you, or I shouldn't
Yeah.
have been standing there when you ran into me with the knife, then we can't have healing. And we're definitely not there yet.
Do you think you ever will heal? Do you think it's possible? You said it's been built on this. Do you believe there's a potential of equality? Do you believe the country can come together one day? Maybe it's your kids' generation.
I want to believe that. I don't think it will happen in lifetime, but I will also say I didn't think that we'd have a Black president in my lifetime. So,
Right.
I was happily wrong there. But again, until, the people in power are ready to have those very honest, tough conversations about making structural change and and directly addressing the inequality in this country, I don't think that healing can take place. And we didn't have that. There was a whole bunch that Obama had to take on in the 8 years that he was in power. So I don't think he could even touch any of that, right? And
Yeah.
so how much further down the line do we have to get? Maybe my kids will be grandparents when that thing happens. So I guess there's a glimmer of hope about, the better angels among us or whatever. I am encouraged by the Naomis and the Gretas, and the Malalas of the world who, are younger
Yeah.
than even my kids in some cases, and about how they're just not putting up with the BS.
Hmm.
And they
Yeah.
understand the need for change, for grassroots change,
Hmm.
fundamental change. And so maybe, but we'll just have to wait and see. But you can't even look that far ahead, right? You have to, we don't. Black people and people of color, marginalized people, don't have the luxury of this pie in the sky mentality when we have to deal with the realities of every single day, right? So,
Yeah.
so what good is it for me to wish for equality or justice or what have you when I know that at least right now and for the foreseeable future it's not
Yeah.
coming? And so how do I, what do I do to calibrate just so that we can continue to move in the world as it currently is?
Oh, it's so frustrating. It's so frustrating to hear that. Even for me, I went to LA. It was last year in the summer, and I accidentally bumped into someone, and she used a derogatory word towards my skin tone. And I'm like, this is 2019, and you're using that word right now.
Yep.
And it's a scary time, and I don't know what to say to my kids. I don't know how to take this forward. And you know, it's, hope takes you far, right? We believe in God because of hope. And it seems like that's really diminished in the
Yeah.
US. And so for you, you talked about the future and it's way out there, maybe potentially can happen. What's your hope for the US in this year?
Oh, this year? Oh, I mean that we're
Tomorrow,
yeah, that I
like
mean that
what
we're
is your hope? What are you holding on to?
I'm holding on to the love of my children. I'm
Yeah.
holding on to knowing that everything that I do is to make their life a little better, a little easier. And so, they are my motivating factor. I have no, we haven't really even talked about coronavirus and COVID-19. I have no idea what this country is going to look like at the end because, we've got 50
Right.
different states that are doing different things. And so, yeah, New York is, some of it at least is still on lockdown, and and the numbers are flattening or decreasing, which is wonderful. But then you get on a plane, and you go, you go down to Florida because you miss the beach, and understandably so that you miss the beach. We all do, and then but then you bring something back, and then you have to start the process all over again, and then it gets to regular flu season, and so I can't even imagine what our health situation is going to look like. And people talk about 45 says, oh, we're going to have a vaccine by the end of the year, and even if it's the middle of next year, right,
Hmm. Hmm.
who's going to take it? Right,
Yeah.
because especially for Black and brown people in this country, with the Tuskegee experiment, with what they did with Native American people in this country, smallpox, I won't be one, and I am pro-vaccine. I have all, to be very clear, I have
Yeah.
all of my vaccines, as do my children, but I will not be first in line to take,
Yeah.
that vaccine because they're rushing it. And
Correct.
understandably so, right? But if you're going to tell me that in a normal world, a vaccine takes 18 months or whatever the case is, but you're going to have it done in 6, you're skipping some steps, right? I'm sorry, but I can't make a recipe in 30 minutes that's supposed to cost,
Mm.
it's supposed to take 90 without skipping a whole bunch of steps, which may affect the flavor, right? So the
Yeah.
metaphor is I won't be first in line, and of course they're going to want to vaccinate Black and brown people first
I knew you were
because
going to say that.
they are essential healthcare workers and essential workers, right?
Mhm.
And because the data now says Black and brown people are most disproportionately affected by COVID, so they're going to be like, oh, well, since you guys get it the most, here, come take this vaccine. No, ma'am.
No, ma'am.
That
No,
won't be.
ma'am.
Yeah. So that's the other thing, right? So even after we have, and the vaccine, my understanding, and I'm definitely not a doctor, but from what I've heard and read, the vaccine is just supposed to make things better, like the flu vaccine. So it doesn't mean that you're not going to get the flu. It just means that it won't be as severe, hopefully, when and if you do get it. But if you don't know, that maybe you're immunocompromised and you're taking it anyway. Like I know my daughter, when she has asthma, so she can't take the nasal flu thing. She has to get it in her arm. So that, and will they be asking those questions?
Hmm.
What underlying conditions do you have? All of those things make me concerned about what's going to happen. And if people, if you've got people protesting, about having to wear their mask in public, which, you don't protest about having to wear your seatbelt, right? These are
Yeah.
preventative measures for your safety, which might be a little annoying,
Hmm.
but are there to keep you alive, right?
Yeah.
And so if
Yeah.
you're going to be protesting that, then I don't have a lot of hope for, what it's going to look like come fall and winter this year. Sorry, this has been very uplifting.
No,
I
I'm just
apologize.
like, I need a drink.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, I'm so glad to be talking to you, and I just want to say thank you for starting the whole Oscars so white situation. That really resonated with me because I was on the carpet in at the Golden Globes, and you felt that change happening, and it was so important that we're progressively, it's slow, but
Yeah.
it's happening, and there is change happening, and you are that voice that made it happen. So you are an example that change can happen, and you are an example that hope is possible, and that we could have that. Maybe I want to prove you wrong in the next few years that things will change. And you're making me feel that we're not alone, and we do need to have these discussions, and we do need to take step forward and do something. And here in Canada, we're ready to support you in any way we can. I mean, we feel it here, as a person of color. And so thank you for being able to have this conversation with me so last minute. You are absolutely amazing. Thank you so much. And say hi to your son.
Thank you. I will. I appreciate it. This was fantastic. I really appreciate, all of your very kind words and just having these conversations. And I think more of them need to happen. But it needs to be on a level of, people who actually can make change, right? Because we
Yeah,
can rail against the wind, but we're not the people, and so Oscar so white, with small potatoes compared to, the lives and deaths of marginalized people in this country and in your country. I don't
yeah,
definitely don't want to downplay the issues, that
yeah,
you've got a much better looking person in charge, but you all still, have your issues as well. So
yeah.
solidarity all
Solidarity
around.
and education is the key, and that's why we're doing this today. So
Exactly.
thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for joining us.
Bye.
Bye.